Well, Oliver Marc Hartwich is an economist and expert in European affairs at the Centre for Independent Studies, and he joins us in the studio now. Oliver Marc Hartwich, can I first just mention some comments from the former US Fed Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who warns the chances of Greece defaulting are, and I quote, so high that you almost have to say there's no way out, and it would drive the US into recession. Is it been accurate?
Well, it's hard to disagree with him, especially on the first bit, because there is no way out for Greece. They will default eventually. Whether it will drive the US into recession is a different question. I think Greece is still a relatively small country, and as long as Greece defaults alone, everything is fine. The real problem is if Greece spreads, the Greek virus spreads to Portugal and Ireland and Spain and perhaps eventually Italy, then it becomes really dangerous, and then of course the US is also in danger.
So you're saying it will default regardless eventually? I mean, is that despite these austerity measures that the Greek PM is trying to push through at the moment?
I think it is basically a certainty. Greek debt to GDP currently stands at about 160% of Greek GDP. It is on a trajectory to reach 200% by 2015, so you can see at some stage in the future Greek politicians and European politicians will come to the conclusion that this is no longer sustainable and the country will have to make
are those levels of debt unprecedented?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, once a country has reached that kind of debt to GDP level of 160 or 200%, the game's over.
In terms of what the Greek PM Papandreou is trying to do at the moment, is he able to, at least in the short term, to stabilise things, or is he just trying to buy some time?
I think they're really just buying some time. I mean, what he's trying to do now is he's trying to increase some taxes and cut some spending, privatize some state-owned enterprises, but really, this is just buying time. It's not really solving the fundamental problems. The fundamental problem for Greece is that the country is simply not competitive because it's locked into the European currency, and therefore they can't devalue, they can't compete with the bigger nations in Europe like Germany and France and Finland and the Netherlands. And as long as that's the case, Greece can't recover.
So, okay, let's look at, assuming that Greece does default, first, what happens to Greece in the long term then?
Well, I think in the long term they have a better chance of actually recovering because they can't recover as long as they still carry all that debt with them. Once Greece defaults, of course, it has wider implications for the European financial system. The biggest problem, I think, at the moment is the European Central Bank, because the European Central Bank has now become the biggest creditor to Greece. They are holding Greek debt to the amount of about 100 billion euros, so they would have to be recapitalized by their own national central banks. And that, of course, means that European taxpayers will have to jump in and recapitalize their own national banks. So that's a big problem, but I think it is better to have this fresh start now rather than to let this absurd theater drag on for another year.
You've just come back from Germany. What's the mood there? I mean, Germany is one of the biggest creditors. I mean, their economy, their taxpayers are basically helping prop up Greece at the moment, aren't they?
And as you can imagine, the Germans are not particularly happy about it. On the other hand, the Germans are also benefiting from the current crisis because that means that they are currently dealing with a quite subdued euro exchange rate. So that makes German exports hyper competitive in world markets. If Germany had its own currency, it would necessarily appreciate against the dollar, and that would, of course, have a negative impact on German exports. So in a way, they are perversely benefiting from the whole situation.
Okay. Based on that assumption again that Greece will eventually default, how long do you think it has, and then what will the flow-on effects be for Australia, for instance?
How long it has, that's a political question. I think it should have defaulted last year, but politicians were able to let it drag on for a while. I think they can still let it drag on for another year or so. But I think the eventual consequences will be all the worse for that. And the consequences for Australia, well, we have seen what happens when international financial markets become anxious about risk. That has a flow-on effect on Australian banks, and probably we will see some increases in our interest rates here as well.
And are you looking at global recession yet again?
Not at this stage. I think if politicians manage somehow to confine the crisis to Greece, as I said, it's a small country and it won't matter that much. The real risk is that the crisis will spread from Greece to other countries, and once it reaches a country as big as Spain or let alone Italy, it's over.
All right. Oliver Marc Hartwich, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.